Welcome everyone, welcome to a new video where we'll have a look at the fly-by-wire speed trim system in the PMDG 777. Now that the 777 has been released, I want to show you a feature that is implemented in the PMDG 777 to help you find the correct trim setting for the pitch axis. First of all though, let's go into some theory on why we have to use a pitch trim. Simply said, in a stable aircraft setup, you have a lift vector that is opposing the center of gravity, and those are not in line, meaning the separation between those two would cause a rotary moment. That's why you have a stabilizer unit that creates a opposing downward force, and that way the whole aircraft stays in a nice equilibrium, and that way it stays on a nice and stable path. Now, changes in flap setting, in airspeed, in use of speed brakes can change that lift vector and change that relationship between lift and center of gravity, and that way you will get a nose up or nose down moment that has to be corrected manually by the use of the elevators, i.e. the flight controls, yoke or flight stick, and then has to be trimmed with the stabilizer to equalize the forces again. With the autopilot engaged, the autopilot system will do the trimming for you, make sure the aircraft is nice and trimmed. However, when you are flying manually, you have to set the stabilizer yourself. On the ground, if you activate the trim switches, nose up or nose down, it moves the stabilizer directly. However, this is the thing, in flight, in the normal mode, with the fly-by-wire system active, in flight you don't move the stabilizer directly. Here you're setting a trim reference speed, and the fly-by-wire system will set elevators and then stabilizers to trim the aircraft for it. And that is in order to allow the fly-by-wire system to simulate a conventional aircraft where, as long as you have trimmed the stabilizer to your current airspeed, there is no nose up or nose down moment. So here you can see, and by the way, the fly-by-wire trim speed can actually be displayed here in the PMDG 777. It's not shown in the real aircraft, but here in the PMDG you can activate that in the MCDU, and I'll show you that in a second where you can do that. And that way you can visually match your trim setting to the current airspeed if you so desire. Or let's say you want to increase the speed here, like in my example, you can push down forward the trim control switches, and that way that trim reference speed will go up. And if you actually let go of the yoke, you will see the aircraft slowly pitching down. So that's a fly-by-wire system in action. And again, you're flying manual flights, so it's not the autopilot, but it's a fly-by-wire system that's doing that for you. And as you reach that trimmed speed, the fly-by-wire system will then raise the nose again, in this case, to stop the aircraft from accelerating. And eventually the airspeed will nicely stabilize around that trimmed speed. Now, you don't have to activate that visual representation, but if you do want it, go into Menu, PMDG Setup, then Options, Simulation, and here on the first page it says Show FBW Trim Reference Speed. And if you set that to yes, then you'll see that cyan FBW indication on your PFD speed scale. So just like a conventional aircraft, you have to adjust the trim setting to kind of get rid of the forces you have to apply on the yoke. That way you will find the aircraft behaving more stable, and the flight path management becomes easier. And I think it's a neat feature to see that visually on the primary flight display. Now again, in flight, by setting the trim reference speed, you are telling the fly-by-wire system to adjust the elevators and then eventually the stabilizer in a manner to have the aircraft stabilize at that trim speed. The cool thing about the fly-by-wire system here is that no matter if you change flap setting, if you use a speed brake, or if you change thrust, the aircraft will maintain that flight path and it will adjust automatically for any moment, pitch up or pitch down, which is quite nice. So the only time you have to then, in manual flight, become active with the trim or yoke inputs is if the aircraft goes away from its trim reference speed. Now let's have a look on how we do this in practice, flying an approach into Brandenburg ILS 07 right. And the moment I switch off the autopilot, you will see that cyan FBW trim reference speed appear again on the speed scale. There it is, and like I mentioned before, the moment you switch off the autopilot, the trim reference speed will be at the current airspeed. And as mentioned before, any changes in configuration like gear down, flaps extension, use of speed brakes, thrust reduction or thrust increase will not impact the forces on the yoke. The only thing that really counts is any deviation from the reference trim speed. Also try to memorize some standard pitch and power values. That also helps you in stabilizing the aircraft quickly. And you can see here from my inputs with the yoke, those are deliberate but not hectic. So there's no need to move around the yoke non-stop. Actually, that's counterproductive really. So the way you fly a 777 or 787 for that matter is just nice and smooth inputs. Make sure the aircraft is trimmed correctly. And the rest is pretty easy. If you have very gusty wind conditions, which causes a quick drop or quick increase in airspeed, you will notice a pitch up or pitch down moment caused by the fly-by-wire system. So yes, you do have to correct that. My idea would be to be more aggressive with the thrust levers, trying to adjust and correct any speed deviations, rather than large yoke inputs. But of course, you do whatever is needed to maintain a good flight path. One thing that does make flying the 777 more challenging is the fact that the approach speeds are a little bit higher than what you're used to in, let's say, an A320 or a 737. So the normal descent rates are somewhat higher as well. And of course, the whole approach will happen 50, a lot quicker. 40, 30, 20, 10. Yeah, so I did get a little bit high at the end of the approach. And again, it happens so quickly. And nevertheless, don't be too aggressive in chasing the glide slope. Just aim for a touchdown point within the touchdown zone, obviously, and just try to land the aircraft smoothly. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, do me the favor and leave a like. That helps smooth the YouTube algorithm to become more visible. Otherwise, See you in the next video. As always, thanks so much for the support, and I wish you all happy landings.